The Black History of Rock and Roll. Yes, this is a channel that I established, and the reason that I did is because basically I'm paying tribute to those um, artists that don't get tribute attributed to. And I started this channel, let alone the pages that go along with it, because I wanted to highlight black musicians in rock and roll, um, as well as like obviously pay tribute to them. Now, black artists in rock and roll are not new. As a matter of fact, they're not just a component of rock and roll, they are the beginning of rock and roll. You get a lot of these cats that try to sidestep that, and they'll just say, well, it's the country and the blues that put that together. Well, black people, foundational black Americans, like rock and roll, also begat country too. And it really bugs me when people are trying to whitewash it. And I literally mean that. One of the things that I do is I also let you know that rock and roll didn't start in the 50s. I'm tracing it way back to the 20s with people like Memphis Minnie. My friend Ogun Prime will even say even more so the 40s, because that's when certain artists developed the foundations of what rock and roll's template came from. On this channel, you'll see a lot of that. Hopefully, I'll bring Ogun on and we can do a live on this channel. You'll see a lot of tributes to that. You'll also see a lot of tributes between 1966 to pretty much 1990s, if not even today. The reason that I chose this period is because it's basically the period that people would say that blacks weren't playing rock and roll. And basically, you know, in a sense, we got Jim Crowed from rock and roll. What happened to people like Nile Rodgers and, you know, stories from Nikki Buzz from Sun. Hopefully we can get him to interview on here too. And just a lot of the crazy things that went down with the record industry when it came to black artists playing rock and roll and being marketed only to play what they considered R&B at that time, or soul music, or what became later disco. So I bring up a lot of artists from that era, a lot of the artists that people would never expect, artists that played progressive rock, artists that played freaking psychedelic rock, of course Jimi Hendrix and of course Arthur Lee, but we got more, you know, more of artists like, you know, Maximilian, you know, bands. I mean, there's so many bands to talk about, bands that were playing punk, you know. Of course, you guys seen the Pure Hell video that I did, and that's one of the popular ones. I put it on all three of my channels. Groups, you know, guys that played in even like post-punk bands, you know, like we had Raymundo. That video is also another popular video on here. Check it out. Raymundo of Death Cult and Sex Gang Children, and, you know, for pretty much like one of the forerunning gothic rock bands. Yeah. And I also I highlight a lot of obscure artists too, you know, and you will see that. You will see a lot of that on my channel, you know, and cats that were pretty much in bands but may seem kind of a little unsung. People like David Branscombe, you know, who played in Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy and Green Jello and so many, with Adam Ant and so many others, you know. And man, I have a long list. Some of these artists I've already covered, but this is what this channel is about. It's definitely a channel that is highlighting the black contributions to rock and roll. Some people have a problem with me mentioning the fact of black society playing rock and roll just because I'm mentioning a race, but they have no problem when it comes to Japanese hardcore or Swedish death metal or Irish folk music. Think of it in that context instead of something that you think is a threat because you think it's negating everybody else, when it's actually talking about a culture. So for me, although I'm a foundational Black American and I'm focusing on a lot of the roots of such being of foundational Black Americans, I also talk about Black people worldwide playing rock and roll. I mentioned, one of them at least right now. And for me, that's the whole thing. I approach this as a historian and also who would be defined as Black, in the context of what we know it as Black society. So yeah, yes, Afro-Latinos, Afro-Asiatic, Middle Eastern people, that are classified as Black, or that would be classified as Black over here. And yes, biracial Black people. I don't get into that whole new school thing of not counting Black biracial people as non-Blacks. I'm not into that because that's some South African divisive type stuff. And we've always counted them as a part of our society because of the experiences that we have and in the context of what goes on in Black society. So you will see people like Bubba Dupree or Brant Bjork, and Lenny Kravitz. Yes, I cover everybody. Nina Cherry. And I will have Africans, bands like, Chrissy Zebby and Ngozi family. You'll see what's on the channel. So yeah, that's sort of a loose summary. You have any questions, hit me up, let me know. Peace.